Good morning, and so very welcome. My name is Sophie Dow, and I'm the founder, together with my husband Robin, of the Salvesen Mindroom Center. It's wonderful to finally be able to welcome you all here today, in person, as well as all of you who are attending virtually. And we welcome you from as many as 24 different countries, from Japan to Norway, from Taiwan to Finland, Brazil, Sweden, India, the US, Canada, and Australia, and many countries in between. You are all so very welcome. We are absolutely delighted to see you here. Well, it's you. A conference doesn't just happen. No, it's at a minimum a 2-year project. So there are quite a few people and organizations that we would like to thank from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you, first of all, to the EICC, and in particular to Karen Webster, who has championed ITAKOM from the very start. But in equal measure, thank you to CEO Marshall Dallas and the entire EICC team. It's an absolute pleasure to work with you. Thank you also to Integrity, our conference organizers, who has put their hearts and the kitchen sink into making ITAKOM a success. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the expression throwing the kitchen sink at something, don't worry, they haven't actually thrown a kitchen sink at us, but it means they have given it their all. Thank you to 4Media and to Pamela Badham, our indispensable, savvy, and wise media partner, and to Maclean's, our ever-patient, agile, creative agency who has designed our super cool ITAKOM logo, as well as just about everything else Salvesen Mindroom. Thank you to our neurodiversity squad, who has made sure that a variety of different perspectives has been taken into account in planning this conference. And thank you, of course, to all our 52 speakers who have given it their everything to support and participate in the success of ITAKOM. Finally, thank you to our gold sponsors, SSE, and to the 4 sponsors from the University of Edinburgh, the Patrick Wild Centre, the Salvesen Mindroom Research Centre, the Simons Institute for the Developing Brain, and to the College of Medicine and Veterinary Medicine. And finally, thank you to our silver sponsors, Martin Curry, Scott Mead, and Bernice Paul. Excuse me. 20 years ago, more or less to the day, I stood on this very stage and welcomed an audience of 900 delegates from all corners of the world to Mindroom's first ever conference. See the Bigger Picture, it was called, the conference. Nobody knew who we were. We were very much the new organization on the block, but we believed in the creative and constructive power of a conference, in bringing together world expertise and delegates to listen and to learn from each other. So, with a vision of a much better world, where no mind is left behind, we decided to launch Mindroom with a big bang here at the EICC in 2003. And you know what? It worked. Today, Salvesen Mindroom has evolved into an organization that has been able to help and support tens of thousands of children and young adults who are neurodivergent. But we do a lot more. We also educate, we advocate, we collaborate, and we innovate. And very importantly, we have our own research center at Edinburgh University. The Salvesen Mindroom Research Center provides a unique opportunity to combine science and reality. And combining science and reality is what we're all here to do today and tomorrow, both literally today and tomorrow, but also beyond the immediate and into the future. Since 2003, the world has come some way towards an understanding of the brain. But there is still a long way to go, because we know not even 10% of how the brain and the mind works. Every year I ask the neuroscientists, how much do we know about the brain today, 2023? And invariably, they find the question too simplistic, because we don't know what we don't know. But what we do know is that it is less than 10%. So the great challenge of the 21st century, they say, will be to understand the brain. And that, to me, is a very exciting challenge, because there is a whole new continent to be discovered, which is the brain. But with that discovery must follow a paradigm shift in how we look at and understand our fellow human beings. A much more holistic approach that includes all kinds of minds, and an emphasis shifting from looking at what the child or the adult can't do to what he or she can do. And speaking of what can be done, and focusing on the strengths instead of the weaknesses, Salvesen Mindroom teamed up with BAFTA and Emmy award-winning production company Fusion Medical Animation to produce a short 3D film in which we travel through the brain in amongst neurons, synapses, and glial cells, and to the stunning score, musical score, composed especially for ITAKOM by former professor of genetics David Fitzpatrick. David says the following about the score. My intention was to create a score that would be of interest to a neurodiverse audience. The opening melodic theme is inspired by the rhythm of the Morse code for ITAKOM. David continues to say, I'm reasonably certain that there will be people in the audience who will spot this feature. I know I can't, but let's see if you can, so please roll the film.
There are about 300 billion stars in the Milky Way, which is a fraction of the number of connections in the brain. We all have about 80 billion neurons, 100 billion glial cells, and close to 1 million billion synapses. These cells and their connections help us take in and respond to the world. And yet, different people process information in different ways. We call this neurodiversity. Even though every brain has the same organic components, our distinctive senses, actions, and circumstances mean that we each trace a unique path through life. For many of us, society still doesn't understand or accommodate our journey or our particular destination. We need to open our minds to a more expansive way of understanding human experience, potential, and creativity. A way that includes all kinds of minds. A way that embraces and respects neurodiversity. A new way that recognizes that the differences between us are a source of strength, inspiration, and joy, and not something to be eroded or avoided. You, we, all of us need to work together in all our glorious diversity to deliver this vision. Just as the brain is built on connections, so are we. By combining our different forms of expertise, our different experiences of the world, we can bring about that much-needed change. Because it takes all kinds of minds to create a truly inclusive world.
This extraordinary film has been produced pro bono by Fusion Medical Animation. And in particular by Fiona Day at Fusion Medical Animation. So thank you so much, Fiona. Sorry, I will calm down. Thank you also to Dilly Barlow for the perfect voiceover, and to David for such an extraordinary and deeply considered musical score. David is someone that my family is especially grateful to, as he discovered our daughter Annie's unique chromosome deletion back in 2007. And unique it is, because Annie is still the only person in the world with this particular chromosome profile, and we've named it, with Annie's consent, Annie's syndrome. I believe that conferences has the capacity to change lives. It certainly changed mine. Our long search for a diagnosis for our daughter eventually took me to a conference on learning difficulties, it's what it was called then, one of the very first in the world in 1998. I went there thinking we were alone in the world with a wonderful child like Annie, and I found the opposite. We were not alone. I went a bewildered, frustrated, and scared parent, and returned home armed with information, inspiration, and a new network of parents and experts to tap into. My family and I, it's impossible to talk about. My family and I found a path forward at that conference, and it is a path that we are still on. So we, Salvesen Mindroom, hope that ITAKOM will do the same for you. Before we get started properly with our first speaker and keynote, there are three key people that I would like to introduce you to. So the first one is Alan Thornborough, our much admired and loved CEO of Salvesen Mindroom, and effectively my boss. Then it's Sue Fletcher-Watson, Professor of Developmental Psychology at Edinburgh University, Director of the Salvesen Mindroom Research Center, and my co-chair at ITAKOM. I have to stop here and tell you quickly about serendipity. It so happened that Sue was one of the psychology students from Durham University that Mindroom had invited as our guests, as in not paying a fee, to the conference in 2003, see the bigger picture. We did that, or I did that, much to the despair of our then chairwoman who was in charge of the budget, because I believed that they were the future and it was an investment in the future. And I was so right, because here we are 20 years later, reaping the benefits of working with the dynamic and wonderful Sue Fletcher-Watson. Smart move by Mindroom. Next up is Jane Cunningham, who also was here 20 years ago. Jane was part of the EICC team who worked with us on See the Bigger Picture. But since then, Jane has moved on to more or less managing the rest of the world and actually now lives in Stockholm. We've effectively swapped cities, you and I. We have very cleverly lured her back to come and help us with ITAKOM. Jane will be our moderator throughout these 2 days. And so now, without further ado, I say thank you very much for listening to me. Over to you, Jane, and let ITAKOM begin.